Hello, I'm Michelle Lou Carriger, and I was the chair of this year's ATHE Outstanding Article Award Committee, and I am very pleased to be here with honorable mention winner Erin C. Thomas to talk about your article from JDTC, Infelicities. Thank you and congratulations on this honorable mention.
Thanks. I'm glad people are reading it and liking it.
I am too. I have a long history with this article, and I have been a big fan of it since its production days. And so I'm really excited to see this award and this recognition for it. So we'll just talk for a few minutes about the article. And I wanted to start by asking you what inspired you to write this particular article and this sort of expose or genealogy of uses of the word performative?
I think it's I've been complaining about people using this word incorrectly on Twitter probably for a decade. But I should go back and say that when I first started graduate school, this word used to pop up all the time and sort of puzzle me. I could never sort of pinpoint how people were using this word. And, I'm interested when I read, when I read, I want to know specifically what people mean. This is like a normal facet of scholarship. And it used to really frustrate me. And I actually, as a graduate student, remember saying, I will not use this word until I have taught myself what it means. And I, sort of forced myself to do a sort of mini genealogy of the word as a graduate student. And then at conferences, you read books, especially, read books outside of the field of theater and performance studies. People use the word in all sorts of ways, just like willy-nilly. And sometimes I have literally no clue what they mean by the word, It's like imagine a scholar saying that's like performatively gross or something. I literally just don't know what that means. But when the special issue of JDCC hashtag performative X, when the call came out for it, I thought, this is that a sort of that there was a sort of moment where people were using the word performative a lot to refer to performative wokeness or performative allyship or other things. And I thought, oh, well, here's the place to actually write this sort of history of uses of the word performative, which is not to say history of performative or performativity as a concept at all, but history of how people have used that word. And so I decided to do it for that because of this sort of long-standing, I don't know, frustration, let's call it, with how people use the word. I want to say too, by the way, that writing this and doing the research on the history of the uses of the word really sort of changed my mind about the word. I actually have it doesn't bother me even a little bit for people who are not scholars to refer to formative wokeness or anything. Like literally that's what that word means in common parlance. So it shouldn't bother me even a bit to hear people use that word that way. That's what it means.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that I found so exciting and so refreshing about this article was that I have, I also teach graduate students and undergraduate students, and I also, have wrestled with the word and what it means, and I was really inculcated into a certain kind of Austen, a J.L. Austen, Judith Butler sort of narrowness about using performative and using performative to only mean performativity. And that's a thing that I've passed on to my students. And I tell them, when you use it, it kind of has to mean this one thing. So I think one thing that was like sort of refreshing and exciting for me is it really reopened and kind of scrambled my in a good way, my feelings about the word and a thing that I had sort of considered settled and quite narrow in the end. So I want to report back from the committee for the award agreed amongst amongst all of us that this was the article that had most changed the way they were thinking about their own writing and their own thinking about their research, even as we were deciding on it, right? Sort of even just within a really short amount of time since reading it. So I love the notion that this is sort of reopening up a thing that maybe had gotten narrow or stale. And I suppose I don't really have a question about it. It's really about, I don't know, do you see your own use of the word or your own research also changing since doing this article?
You know, it's funny that you say it this way, because I only use the word in what I think of as an Austinian or Butlerian sense. That is how I choose to use the word. But I think the article argues that people are using it in all sorts of ways, and that actually when people use it, it's more interesting to think of their uses of the word as opening up a set of questions rather than sort of deciding this is what this word means. The fact of it as a set of questions we should be asking ourselves. Actually, the use of the word, to my mind, prompts a thinking when I read now, which is,
Mhm.
I'm that sort of nerd that in books that I'm reading is like underlining each with a question mark, like, what does it mean here? What does it mean here? But actually, it does prompt for us, right? Like, what is this performance doing? What is this performance citing? Is this performance making a thing happen that I haven't thought about before? So I like the idea of the slippage of it,
Mhm.
and for me, a prompt to ask better and smarter questions is always a good thing. And so this is, I've become more fond of the word, even though I will say I'm pretty strict in my own uses of it, or try to be. I might mess up too, right?
I appreciate that totally. Well, I think maybe we move on to sort of, there's a place, right? The article ends, you sort of walk us through many different uses and many different theorists and really foundational people to performance studies in particular, and the ways in which the word has sort of always exceeded what might be kind of an orthodoxy around the teaching of it, or yeah, our
Yeah,
complaints
I wanted
among
to hit
ourselves.
too, sort of like where it first appeared
Yeah.
in some of the main journals of the field. And actually, because this was in JDTC, JDTC turned out to be like a really interesting place to think about when the word started appearing, since it meant a series of different things over different articles in the first 3 or 4 issues of JDTC. Is just an odd little coincidence.
Mm. Was there, I don't know, do you have a favorite or a particular example from the research that you were doing on all of these different usages that popped out to you or that were
The
unexpected?
thing that pops out to me the most is people have their own idea of what it means. People are using performative to mean theatrical, or people are using the word to mean performance. And that means not just that that's how they use it when they write, but it means that they are misreading other people. And so one of the things that, because for them the word means, and this is something that I saw in a couple of the early issues of JDTC, and I won't be specific, although it's in the article. I always feel like I'm reading other people, and I don't really want to be insulting at all. People get to use words however they want to use them. But if I think the word means theatrical, and then I go read, Barbara Johnson, and Barbara Johnson is using the word in an Austinian way, but in my mind the word means theatrical, I'm actually going to interpret an entire thing, an entire argument, let's say, about Mallarmé or something, in a way that is actually not at all what that theorist means,
Right.
because the word means something else to me. And
Right.
this is actually a problem because because, you know, the word stops doing the work it's supposed to be doing, right?
Mhm.
And I can theorize a whole thing dependent on somebody else, and that's not what she meant at all.
Yeah, I mean, that gives me sort of like that dizzying kind of mise en abîme feeling of kind of like a post-structuralist kind of,
Yeah.
um,
I hope you see
but
that in the article, because there, trying to trace that back, like what people are talking about, becomes, as you say, quite dizzying. Like,
mm,
oh, he means what?
yeah, I think that's one thing that's such an unexpected pleasure of this article is like, this is an article that's doing very different work than we very often sort of like say a research article is doing, right? Like we say, oh, put your original research, make a new claim. But this does a very different thing. And I think that's why it was so striking to us in the committee is that it's sort of literally collating, right? Things that were already said and already argued, and looking at them again and saying, actually, we need to re-look at these things in conjunction with each other and see maybe where these, I mean, I want to imagine also in kind of a, I don't know, probably Derridian or Bartesian way that like there could be a productive misunderstanding, right? Like if I misread Barbara Johnson and come up with new ideas, that is both kind of magical,
Hmm.
like misunderstand and come up with new knowledge, um, and also kind of terrifying, right? Like where's the new knowledge coming from if it is?
It's in excess, right? But
Yeah.
you're right. It has this Derridian sort of feeling, which is what does it mean to get something wrong?
Mhm.
And wrong. What does
Yeah.
it mean to get something wrong? And what new, very cool ideas might that produce? Which is
Yeah.
perhaps what I've been doing in my scholarship a lot, anyway.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, maybe this is a way for us to sort of transition toward, I want to discuss the place where the article ends. And so I'll give you a quote that really stood out to me that's on the last page of the article, which is, um, you're talking about Anne Enling Cheng in particular, and in describing it, right, glossing her work, you say performance is that which exceeds the performative, right, sort of fleetingly escaping its norms. And so I love the idea that the performance here, meaning like sort of the theatrical or the acted out, right, exceeds this notion of the performative in the Butlerian or Austinian sense of like the thing that really is accomplished. And it brings, I think, theater and theatricality back into the conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe stakes a claim for, and this is a thing, I feel a deep affinity with this because um, I also am constantly wondering, well, what's the status of the fake? What is the status of the fantasy, of the theatrical, of the imagined? And have we done it a disservice by insisting on the, sort of the thing that really happens, or the real, or the performative? So I want to ask you about, where are you going there? Like, what's the inspiration behind bringing us back to theater and theatricality?
I think, okay, so I think there is a something that I'm trying to tease out there is, as we emphasize performative, and this is true in the Bobbin sense, and in the Butlerian sense, both, that performative is a thing that changes the world or makes the world or structures the world. I'm speaking across those two different meanings. But Chang's read, and she's talking about watching Nancy Kwan perform, and there's something that she doesn't quite know how to describe, or something that is a little more than, there are all these rules and there is this structure, and then there is the performance that isn't quite that, and doesn't, it can't quite be simply explained by this is just happening within a set of sort of legalistic borders or norms. um, and I love the idea of performance, or I want to think about the idea of performance as something that it doesn't need to escape. It just needs to be a little off or a little different. Because But also it doesn't need to remake the world or change anything, you know, so that everything is different after this one performance. In fact, what we get in her description is really just like what it means to me. This little excess that I took in and meant something special or couldn't quite define or puzzled me for a long time or whatever. And how wonderfully, really fabulously productive is that just a little thing. And it doesn't need to remake the world. It can just be a little extra, a line of flight or something, right? Like
Mhm.
just something else. And to go back to your question about theatricality, it's really just like, what is the value of something that isn't a performative, but is just phony, or or just like a little more than it should be, that triggers something a little off, that seems to me the value of theater as such, or theatricality as such.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's maybe a wonderful invitation to us as theater and performance scholars to maybe broaden our horizons or possibly sort of zoom in our horizons.
Yeah. Yes, because and this is right. This is I'm addressing this to academics, and I'm thinking of it like that because I think too often we want something to change the world or mean something really, really big. And in by asking that question, always by looking at it in that from that point of view, there's something we might always miss, or there are a lot of things that we might miss that are just much smaller. And for me, those things have a lot of value. And so I want us to sort of, and you're right, it isn't expand or narrow. I'm not sure which it is. But look a little differently and not ask quite so much
Mhm.
of the things at which we're looking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the charge, I guess, for us
I suppose
moving
so.
forward. All right. Um, Thanks so much for this interview and for this fabulous article. I'm looking forward to ongoing conversations about these things and which new and exciting, tiny or broader or far off there or slightly to the side things you encounter next. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle.